All right, let's dive deep, shall we? Today we're looking at this YouTube video called My Perspective, Genesis 7, The Destruction of the Earth.
Interesting title.
It is.
Uh-huh.
It's by DCU Official,
Okay.
and they've got some really unique interpretations of this whole Noah's Ark and the flood narrative.
Okay.
And so I thought it'd be really fun to kind of dive into some of this stuff.
Sure.
One of the things that they start off with that I found really interesting was this idea that even though like the world was full of wickedness at the time,
Right.
God saw this righteousness in Noah.
Yeah.
And they were saying that that single righteous person
Yeah.
was enough for God to like hit the pause button on the judgment that he was going to bring.
It's like, wow. It makes you think about the impact of faith, right?
Yeah.
The Creator even connects it to like Jesus' second coming and how maybe even today there's just one believer
Oh, wow.
whose prayers are holding back judgment.
Whoa. That's a heavy thought right there.
It is.
So what are your thoughts on this whole concept of like God's mercy and righteousness
Right.
in the context of like destruction?
Well, it's a paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, theologians have been wrestling with this forever.
Right.
You have a God who's just
Yeah.
and punishes wrongdoings, but he's also incredibly merciful.
Yeah.
Giving second chances,
Yeah.
willing to like delay things. It really makes you think about what divine justice really is.
Yeah.
Is it just about like punishing people, or is it more about trying to restore them?
Right. So speaking of restoration,
Yeah.
the Creator brings up this whole thing about the animals on the ark.
Oh, right.
God says to take 7 pairs of clean animals and only 2 pairs of unclean animals.
Okay.
And they were saying that this was like a sign that God just didn't like waste.
Interesting.
You know, and even though he could have just like snapped his fingers and made brand new animals,
Oh, right. Yeah.
he chose to like preserve the existing ones.
Yeah. That's a good point. It's like, why would he even bother with that, right? He's God.
Yeah. He could have just made new ones.
Totally. And you know that whole clean and unclean thing?
Yeah.
That goes way back in Jewish tradition.
Yeah.
Like to dietary laws and beliefs about purity and all that. You know, it makes you wonder if this is like a little window into how people thought back then when this stuff was first written down.
I like that, bringing in that historical context.
Yeah.
So what do you think about God's choice to save both the clean and unclean animals? Like, what does that say about his relationship with all of creation?
That's a tough one. Some people might say it shows God values all life,
Okay.
regardless of how we humans might categorize it.
Right.
You know, clean or unclean. It doesn't matter to God. He
Yeah.
just wants to preserve it all.
Right.
Maybe it's about keeping that diversity going.
Yeah.
You know, making sure all the different species can keep going.
Mm.
It definitely challenges us to think about how we see nature
Yeah.
and how we treat different forms of life.
I like that.
Yeah.
Now, there's another thing the Creator really emphasized. The 7 days before the flood,
Oh, right. Yeah.
they see that as this potential time for repentance.
Yeah.
A testament to God's patience, right?
Interesting. You know that number 7?
Yeah.
That pops up all over the Bible.
Okay, yeah.
Usually it's about something being complete
Right.
or like the divine cycle,
Yeah.
the creation story, rituals, and now this last chance before the flood. It makes you wonder, is it meant to show how important that week was?
Like a countdown.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
A countdown to judgment.
Wow. So how do theologians interpret God's patience?
Well, some say it's about God's love for humanity. Like he doesn't want to give up on us,
Yeah.
even when we're messing up big time.
Right.
Others say it's about justice, giving people time to choose to do the right thing before it's too late.
Right.
But then it brings up the whole free will thing. If God already knows what's going to happen, why even give people a chance to change their minds?
Right.
Is it really a real choice?
Uh,
Or is it just to show what's truly in our hearts?
Right. Now, let's talk about Noah's obedience. The Creator really admires how precisely Noah followed God's instructions.
Yeah.
They even give the example of how he gathered the exact number of clean and unclean animals,
Yeah.
like down to the last pair.
Wow.
Total obedience.
Do you imagine trying to do that?
I know, right? Like, building the ark is one thing.
Exactly.
But rounding up all those animals.
And then keeping track of them all. Crazy.
It makes you think about faith and obedience. Like,
Yeah.
what does it really mean to be obedient in this context?
Yeah.
Is it just blind faith? Or is there something deeper going on?
Well, sometimes obedience is seen as like the foundation of our agreement with God.
Mhm.
Like we show him, we trust him by following his commands.
Right.
It might not make sense to us all the time,
Yeah.
but we do it anyway because we have faith.
So Obedience as an act of faith. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the flood itself. The video creator uses some really vivid imagery to describe its power.
Oh, yeah.
Fountains of the deep breaking open, windows of heaven opening,
Wow.
rain for 40 days and 40 nights straight.
Sounds terrifying.
It does, yeah, like a total reshaping of the world.
Yeah.
And they emphasize how the water came from above and below,
Right.
like a double whammy.
Yeah, like the world was being swallowed up from all sides.
And that rained for 40 days and 40 nights.
Mm-hmm.
What's the significance of that number 40? It shows up a lot in the Bible.
You're right. It does. It usually represents like a time of testing
Okay.
or transformation. The Israelites in the desert for 40 years.
Right, yeah.
Jesus fasting in the wilderness for 40 days. It's like a time of intense trial, you know?
So could the 40 days and 40 nights of rain symbolize a global purification?
Maybe. Like washing away the old to make way for the new.
A total reset. And it wasn't just the rain, right?
Yeah.
The creator talks about the phrase, the waters prevailed, and they think this means humanity actually trying to fight back against the flood.
Like they tried to stop it.
Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. It makes you think about what that must have been like for them.
Right.
Facing this unstoppable force.
Yeah.
Did they build walls? Try to find higher ground?
Yeah.
It makes the story feel so real.
I know, it's like that human instinct to survive kicking in,
Yeah.
even when facing divine judgment.
Do you think it could symbolize something bigger, you know?
Like what?
Like the battle between good and evil?
Mm.
Or maybe humanity struggling against the consequences of our actions?
I like that connection to a larger theme.
It makes you think even though God caused the flood,
Right.
people still had choices to make.
Yeah.
And those choices mattered.
And the video creator even speculates that people might have used technology to try and combat the flood.
Technology back then, what did they even have?
That's a good question.
And would it even have mattered against the power of nature?
Especially when it's tied to God's will. It reminds me of how we rely on technology today.
Right.
Are we putting too much faith in it?
Good question.
Forgetting about the forces we can't control.
Yeah, that's something to think about.
So the floodwaters rise, covering everything, even the mountains.
Right.
And the creator mentions this one specific detail that I found really powerful.
What's that?
They say the water rose 15 cubits higher than the highest mountain.
Wow. Like just to drive home the point,
Yeah.
nothing was spared.
It was a complete submersion.
A total reset.
And then all flesh died.
Yeah.
Humans, animals, birds, everything not on the ark.
It's a heavy thought.
Yes.
The consequences of turning away from God.
It makes you think about the fragility of life.
It does. But, you know, there's still that glimmer of hope.
Yeah.
God saved Noah and his family
Right.
and the animals on the ark. A seed for a new beginning.
This delicate balance of destruction and hope.
Yeah.
It's powerful stuff. And then the creator hits us with a detail that's almost impossible to grasp. They say the waters prevailed on the earth for 150 years.
150 years.
Can you imagine? It's hard to even comprehend.
I know. It's like a completely different way of thinking about time.
Right. 150 years. What did the world even look like during that time?
Was it just water everywhere?
I don't know. It's mind-boggling.
What do you think it symbolizes?
I don't know. The creator doesn't really give specific answers,
Right.
but they do leave us with a heavy question.
What's that?
If a flood that lasted for 40 days and 40 nights led to water covering the earth for 150 years,
Yeah.
what does that say about the lasting impact of sin?
Wow.
It makes you think, right?
It does. About the ripple effects of our choices.
Yeah.
How the consequences can stretch out way beyond the moment.
And the nature of God's judgment,
Hmm.
is it immediate?
Or does it unfold over time?
A gradual process of cleansing and renewal.
And if it was a time of renewal, what does that say about God's patience?
Yeah.
His commitment to restoring creation?
It challenges how we think about time, doesn't it?
It really does. It suggests that God operates on a whole other level than we do,
Right.
with plans that span across huge amounts of time.
It's a reminder that we're part of something so much bigger than ourselves.
Much bigger.
Something beyond our limited understanding of time and space.
Exactly.
You know, in all this destruction and judgment, the creator still talks about Noah and his family surviving
Yeah.
and the animals in the ark.
Right.
It's this little spark of hope. Right.
It is. It's like a miniature version of creation, tucked away safe in the ark,
Right.
waiting for a chance to start fresh. It shows that even after something so devastating, there can still be new beginnings.
Yeah. It's interesting how the creator brings up the timing of the flood, too.
Yeah.
The 600th year of Noah's life.
Yeah.
The 17th day of the second month.
Very specific.
Why do you think they emphasize those exact details?
Maybe it's to show that this was all part of God's plan.
Right.
Like, he's paying attention to every little detail.
Yeah.
This is important, he's saying. Mark it down.
It adds weight to the whole event.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, it's all part of something bigger, a plan that's been in motion for a long time.
And then there's how they describe the flood itself.
Right.
With all this incredible imagery.
Yeah, the creator really paints a picture with their words.
Fountains of the great deep bursting open.
Wow.
Windows of heaven flung wide.
It's terrifying, but also kind of awesome, you know?
It is. This feeling of awe and terror all mixed together.
Exactly. Like, you know it's bad, but you can't help but be amazed by the scale of it all.
And it wasn't just rain.
No.
It was water from above and below.
Oh, right.
Like the earth itself was crying out.
Yeah, a total deluge. No escaping it.
And then that rain, 40 days and 40 nights.
40. That number keeps popping up.
I know, right?
What do you think it means in this context?
Well, we talked about 40 representing testing and transformation.
Right.
So maybe this is like a global purification.
Washing everything away to make something new.
Exactly. Like a forced reset button on the whole world.
It makes you think about how change happens.
Yeah.
Is it always slow and gradual?
Or are there times when you need a complete upheaval? It's like ripping off the Band-Aid, right?
Exactly. Sometimes you got to start from scratch.
And then there's that phrase, the waters prevailed.
Oh, yeah.
The creator thinks this means people tried to fight the flood.
They didn't just give up?
No, they resisted. What do you imagine that looked like?
I don't know. It's hard to picture.
Building dams, maybe? Or desperately climbing to higher ground?
Right. Trying anything to escape.
Yeah. It shows that even when faced with something so overwhelming,
Yeah.
the human instinct to survive, to fight back, is powerful.
It's like, no matter how bad things get, we still cling to hope.
Do you think that struggle could be symbolic?
Maybe? Of what?
Like our internal battles? Good versus evil?
Hmm.
Or maybe just humanity's struggle against the consequences of our actions?
That's interesting. It adds another layer to the whole story, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's like even though God caused the flood, people still had choices to make.
And those choices mattered.
Exactly. The creator even speculates that people might have used technology to try and stop the flood.
Technology. During Noah's time, what would that even be?
Who knows?
Yeah,
It's fun to imagine, right?
it is. But would it have been enough against the power of nature?
And God's will.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes even our best technology fails.
Right.
Especially when we're up against forces beyond our control.
It's like a cautionary tale, maybe,
Maybe it is.
about putting too much faith in our own creations.
And forgetting about the bigger picture.
Right. So the floodwaters rise, covering everything.
Even the mountain.
And then the creator gives us this really specific detail.
What's that?
They say the water rose 15 cubits higher than the highest mountain.
Like, just to make sure everything was submerged.
Right.
Like
Complete and utter cleansing.
a total reset button for the world.
And then all flesh died.
Humans, animals, everything that wasn't on the ark.
This stark reminder of the consequences.
Of what happens when we turn away from what's right.
But even in that loss,
Yeah.
there's still that glimmer of hope.
Noah, his family, the animals on the ark, the potential for a new beginning.
This balance of destruction and hope is really powerful.
It is. It's like two sides of the same coin.
And then the creator tells us that the waters covered the earth for 150 years.
150 years.
That's longer than most lifetimes.
I know. It's hard to wrap your head around.
What do you even make of a number like that?
It's like a whole different scale of time.
What was the world even like during those years?
Just a vast, empty ocean.
It makes you wonder what Noah and his family did all that time,
Right. Stuck on that ark.
and what was happening to the earth itself,
Was it slowly drying out?
or something else entirely. The creator doesn't give us any easy answers, but they do ask a thought-provoking question.
What's that?
If a 40-day flood resulted in the earth being covered for 150 years, what does that tell us about the lasting consequences of our choices? It really makes you stop and think, doesn't it?
It does. About the ripple effects of our actions.
Yeah.
How long the consequences can linger.
And it makes you question what God's judgment really means.
Is it a sudden punishment?
Or a slow, gradual process?
A cleansing that takes generations.
And if those 150 years were a time of renewal,
Right.
what does that say about God's patience?
His commitment to making things right again.
It really challenges how we think about time.
And how God works.
Yeah. His plans unfold on a much grander scale than we can
It's
imagine.
humbling, isn't it?
It is. To realize we're part of something so much bigger than ourselves.
Something beyond our limited understanding.
I don't know about you, but it's kind of hard to wrap my head around the sheer scale of this event.
Yeah.
Like a global flood
Right.
for 40 days and 40 nights,
Yeah.
then water covering the earth for 150 years.
It really makes you reconsider the whole Noah's Ark story, doesn't it?
It really does.
And, like, we hear this story so much growing up. We almost forget how huge it is.
Right.
But when you really think about it,
Mm-hmm.
it's this incredible act of destruction
Yeah.
and creation.
Yeah.
Wiping everything clean
Right,
to
yeah.
start fresh.
And what's cool is the video creator doesn't just talk about the physical stuff.
Right.
They relate it back to us,
Yeah.
the impact of our choices.
Mm-hmm.
Like towards the end, they talk about subscribing, liking, commenting,
Oh, yeah.
and how even those small actions can have a ripple effect.
It's a good point.
Yeah.
Connecting Noah's obedience to our own lives.
I like that.
Like, we can all make a difference.
Yeah. Just like Noah's actions led to humanity
Yeah.
and the animals being saved,
Mhm.
our choices, even the small ones, can contribute to something bigger.
We all have the power to impact the world.
It's really inspiring.
It is.
This whole deep dive has been amazing.
I agree.
This story is so relevant, even today.
It really is. It's not just some ancient tale.
Right. It's about human nature,
Yeah.
the consequences of our actions,
Mhm.
and the possibility of redemption.
And renewal.
It's given me so much to think about.
Me too.
And I love how this video gave us a fresh perspective.
Yeah. It's like seeing the story with new eyes.
Well, I'm glad we took this deep dive together.
Me too. Always a pleasure.
So for our listeners out there, we'll leave you with this.
Okay.
If the floodwaters, this symbol of judgment and cleansing, prevailed for 150 years,
Wow. Yeah.
what does that tell us about the impact of our choices? How could we make